All right, moving on to solving one-step equations with multiplication and division in them. Okay, so how do we solve these one-step equations with multiplication and division? Well, let's make sure. I want to clarify a term here. When we talk about a coefficient, okay, that's the number that's being multiplied with the variable. Okay, when you look at 3x, remember when a number and a letter are next to each other, that denotes multiplication. Okay, the number is the coefficient. So if I had 5t, the 5 is the coefficient. If I had 1/2 x, the 1/2 is the coefficient. Okay? So that's what when I say coefficient, that's what we mean. All right? All right. Division and multiplication properties fall in line with the same thing we're doing with addition and subtraction. You're thinking opposite. Okay? Opposite operation. Okay? So that's what we want to do. If you divide each side by the equation by the same non-zero number, then the two sides remain equal. So if I have 2x equals 6, and I divide both sides by 2, 2 over 2 cancels to 1. I get 1x, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay? Notice here, we had multiplication right here, and what did we do to get the x by itself? We divided. Okay? Opposite operation. So if I want to solve this right here, 30 equals 6d. Again, just like what we were doing with addition and subtraction, we want to isolate our variable, get it by itself. So I do the opposite operation. I see that this is multiplication. My coefficient is 6. So I'm going to divide the 6 out on both sides. As long as I do the same to both sides, I'm okay. 6 over 6 is 1. 6 goes into 35 times. Does 30 equal 6 times 5? Sure does, it checks. Does 2 times 3 equal 6? Sure does, it checks. You can always plug it back in and see if you got the right answer. Okay, multiplication property. So you'll notice here we have division. X over 4 equals 7. If you multiply both sides by 4, the 4's cancel out. X is 28. Does 28 divided by 4 equals 7? Sure does. Okay. M over 5. If this helps you, just couldn't write it like that with my. Looks like that. So if you're going to multiply both sides by 5, boom, boom, they cancel out. And negative 7 times 5 is negative 35. Negative 35 divided by positive 5 is negative 7. It checks. Okay? We'll look at some more examples of these. But you're thinking opposite operation. All right? So if we see multiplication, divide by whatever the coefficient is on both sides. If you see division, divide by or multiply by whatever's in the denominator. Okay? Just think opposites using the same number. You don't have to figure out what number it's going to be. Okay? What is the multiplicative inverse? It's the reciprocal. Okay? And we've been talking about reciprocals, so we know what those are. Okay? And the thing about reciprocals is if you take them and multiply them together, you get 1. So 3/4 times 4/3. If this looks better for you, you get 12 over 12, which is 1. You can also think of canceling everything out. And 1 over 1 is 1. Okay? Finding the multiplicative inverse of 2 and 1/3. Well, we got to make it improper first, right? 3 times 2 plus 1. 3 times 2 plus 1, we get 7/3, right? And I think we're pretty good with that right now. So if 7/3 is our fraction, then the multiplicative inverse of that will just be the reciprocal. Okay? Just find the reciprocal and you're good. Okay, so how do we use that here? Okay? Well, when we start stepping up some of these problems we've been doing because they look pretty easy right now. So let's say you get something like this. Okay? Now let's find x. Okay, example, 1/2 x equals is multiply the equation with the fraction, multiply with multiple inverse. We'll see how that goes. So let's say we start out here. We've got this. We've got 1/2 x equals 8. And we want to solve for x. Okay? Well, when we're multiplying, this is really multiplication and division in one. Anytime your coefficient is a fraction, you're going to use your multiplicative inverse. Okay? How do I get this to be 1x? Well, I multiply by its reciprocal. And everything cancels out. I get x by itself. So I've got to do the same thing to here. 8 times 2 is 16 over 1 is 16. That's what I got here. Okay? And 1/2 times 16 equals 8, so it checks. You got a decimal in here. Let's do this one right here. What if you had x over 0.25 equals 6? Now that's a quarter. It's division here, so you know you're going to multiply by 0.25. Okay, both sides. So x is going to be 1.5. Okay, just calculated that out. Boom. Okay. So if you see a fraction with your variable coefficient of fraction, you're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Okay, we'll look at some more of those. Real world problem. Valerie needs 2/3 yards of fabric to make a hat. How many hats can she make with 6 yards of fabric? We got 6 yards of fabric, and we want to divide them up into 2/3 of a yard each. So how many can we get in? So how many 2/3 can we get into the 6th? Okay. So if this is 2/3 n, guess what we're going to multiply with? It's reciprocal, 3 over 2. Everything cancels out. 3 over 2 here, remember you put that over 1. You get 1 in here because that's 1. 18 over 2 is 9. So you get 9 pieces that are 2/3 of a yard each out of a 6-yard sheet of fabric. Okay? Look at some examples. Solving for C here, this is multiplication because your coefficient is 6, so do the opposite and divide by 6. Want to check it? 6 times 3 equals 18, it checks. This is division, so we multiply. Whatever that number is, just do the opposite operation with it. And -3 times 12 is -36. Does -36 divided by 12 equal -3? Sure does. We've got a decimal here. It's multiplication, so divide. It was in there twice. Does 1.6 times 2 equal 3.2? Sure does. Here I've got a fraction times my variable. My coefficient's a fraction, so I'm going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. And I've talked about this before when we were doing integers. I like to keep the negative up top. Okay, don't put it top and bottom. I don't like it out front because then you lose track of it. I just put it with the top number. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So everything cancels out there. I get h by itself. Negative times a negative is a positive, so I got a positive 1h. Got to be positive. Negative times a negative, I'm going to get a positive 18 over 10. And if you want to simplify that down, all of those work. Okay? So that's what we're going to be doing here the next week. Solving one-step equations with multiplication and division using the opposite operations just like we have been. And the only thing we got to look for is if we get a fraction as a coefficient, multiply both sides by its reciprocal. Okay? All right, we'll get after this tomorrow. See you then.